Thank you, Justice Page. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. We feel absolutely incredibly fortunate to have you help us with our intersection and connection here at TEDxMinneapolis.
Well, I'm honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
Well, let's set the stage. So many folks know you, and they know your history and your reputation, sir, and have had the privilege of encountering your work either as a fan or as a Minnesotan, and your accomplishments within the law or maybe your foundation. And there are many here who have yet to hear your story. And so we are maybe meeting you for the first time. So I'd like to have a conversation with you, which is kind of a non-traditional kind of TEDxMinneapolis film. But this conversation is our way of experiencing you and highlighting some of the things that you want to highlight and the messages that we all can move forward with, if that's all right with you.
That sounds good.
Right.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome to our stage. Let's start with the early years. Can we start with your formative years in Canton, Ohio? What was it about those early stages that served as the foundation for your future?
I think that the foundation of for my future was grounded in parents who loved me, who cared for me, who made sure that I understood the difference between right and wrong, who valued education, who understood that for a young African-American kid growing up in the 1950s, that education could be used as a tool to have a better life. They also understood, I think, and this is something they wouldn't have necessarily thought about, but they valued, or at least instilled in me, the importance of seeking excellence, being good at whatever you're doing. I can remember, I don't know how many times I heard them say, we don't necessarily care what you do when you grow up, but whatever you do, be as good at it as you can be. Wow. You're going to be a lawyer, for example, be the best possible lawyer you can be. You're going to be a garbage collector, be the best garbage collector you can be. And as I say, I don't know that they thought about that in the context of seeking excellence, but at least I took it as that's how one gets to achieve their highest self, if you will. And I was lucky, as I say, not only was it, parents, but family and extended family. That was a consistent message. The other consistent message was be fair, be honest, be kind, treat other people with respect, and respect yourself. And somehow some of that took.
I think it did. I'm pretty sure it did. Well, you mentioned law, and it's been said that you knew you wanted to be a lawyer from a very early age or an early time in your life. Is that true? And why law, and when did you know?
It is true. When I got to be about that age when, we ask kids what they want to do when they grow up.
Sure.
I didn't have, first blush, I didn't have a ready answer. But what I knew was that if things went well for me, 8, 9, 10 years old, things went well for me looking around the neighborhood, I might get a job in a steel mill. I had an uncle who spent 40 years working in various steel mills. And I also knew that steel mills were dirty, they're dangerous, and the work is repetitious. At that young age, I knew that that's not my idea of a good time. I'd heard stories about lawyers, and all those stories involved big fancy cars, big houses, not working too hard. I mean, anything outside of a steel mill was not working too hard. Maybe playing golf on Wednesday afternoons. And when you weigh dirty, dangerous, and repetitious with big fancy cars. In the 8 to 10-year-old mind, it goes to big fancy cars every time.
Good thing.
The other thing that had an impact was that, as you know, in the 1950s, a good portion of this country was subject to state-sponsored segregation. And that lack of fairness, if you will,
Sure.
that injustice was something that was sort of ingrained into me as I was growing up. 1954, when I was 8 years old, the Supreme Court decided Brown versus the Board of Education.
Yeah.
And even though I didn't understand completely the implications of that, I understood that from that decision, there was hope. Hope that if you can create fairness and justice in education, you can create fairness and justice in other areas. And I developed the sense over time that the law was about fairness, solving problems, and helping people. And something that I've always been interested in. And so between that love of big fancy cars, that sense of justice and fairness, I developed the sense that the law was it. That was an area that hopefully I could make a contribution.
Thank you. Let's talk about your college life. You were a standout football player for Notre Dame, Fighting Irish, an All-American. You won the 1966 national championship.
Well, I did.
Yeah. Okay.
We all sort of.
Yeah.
There's this team thing.
Team thing. Had a perfect record. How about the game of the century against Michigan State? And you were an exemplary student.
Well, I wasn't the student that I could have.
Oh, interesting. So how did college shape you?
I wasn't the student that I should have been. But.
Yeah. What would you do differently?
I don't. Given the way things have turned out, I don't know that I'd do anything differently.
Yeah. You did pretty okay.
One of the downsides for me growing up was in elementary school, junior high, and for the most part, high school, performing in the classroom wasn't terribly difficult. And human beings being who we are, when there's an easy way to do something and a hard way, there's a tendency to want to take the easy way.
Yeah.
So that as a young learner, not having to work too hard and, doing pretty well, I never really learned how to learn. And I never really, because it was so easy, I never fell in love with learning. I didn't really learn those things and fall in love with it until I was in law school.
Oh.
And, if I could sort of wave a magic wand, I suppose I wouldn't complain about learning how to learn and falling in love earlier. But the beauty of it is we all have the opportunity, whether it's early on or later on, to be captured by learning for the sake of learning.
Yeah, curiosity.
And when I think back on my legal career, spurred by curiosity, and I think back on the law clerks that I hired as a justice on the court, the one quality, the most important quality I looked for was curiosity. The rest will take care of itself.
Sure.
You can be smart, you can be, all of those things. But if you don't have curiosity, there's something missing.
Taking things in, learning from them. It's great. Well, let's talk about those rules, the strategy and transition into law, because I think that's a really amazing transition from a successful football career to becoming a lawyer and then eventually a judge is quite remarkable. How'd you navigate that transition?
Remarkable.
Okay.
Yes.
Ernest. How'd you navigate that? That's a change.
It is and it isn't.
Okay.
It's a change from doing something physical
Sure.
to doing something intellectual, if you will. It's a change in terms of the structure that you're working in.
Yeah.
But in the sense of once you sort of know what you're doing, the rest of it follows sort of the same path. It was being able to focus on the task at hand, whether you're on a football field or in a courtroom, being able to make a decision, being able to make that decision and not look back and second guess it, while at the same time making sure that you're doing the right thing so that you don't have to second guess it. Working hard, the one thing I mentioned, being able to focus, that I think is critical. I can't tell you the number of, whether it was on the field or in the law, people with bigger brains, smarter, work just as hard, everything else being equal, couldn't focus on the task at hand, couldn't, if you will, compartmentalize so that you address the discrete problem in front of you at the moment and not the problem that's over here that you may have to deal with, but you don't have to deal with it right now. That was something that I've been able to do. Don't ask me how or why, but...
Now, you were a justice on the Minnesota Supreme Court from 93 to 2015?
22 years, 8 months.
Wow, not that I'm miscounting. Now, I know that road to the Supreme Court didn't follow a normal path, and it wasn't without its bumpy times, and maybe didn't even almost happen at all at some point. What challenges did you face in terms of getting on the court or throughout your career? Or I think you just intimated some racial inequity. Can you speak to that in terms of getting placed?
Well, my path to the court was not sort of the typical path. Here in Minnesota,
Right.
most of our judges are appointed to fill a vacancy.
Right.
We also have a system that provides for elections.
Yes.
And I had, quite frankly, when I left law school, and even the first 4 or 5 years of practicing law, it never would have occurred to me that I either had an interest or the ability to serve on the Minnesota Supreme Court. This strange thing happened. I know I'd been practicing for 3 or 4 years, and one morning, pick up the newspaper, and actually, I think Diane pointed me to the newspaper, and there was this article that said that then Governor Perpich was going to appoint me to a seat on our local district court. That was news to me.
Wow. I think he might have called.
Long story short, it triggered the thought in me that, well, maybe there's something I could contribute. Not necessarily understanding and beginning to understand my skills and abilities, not necessarily on the district court, the trial court, but in one of our state's appellate courts. Governor Perpich didn't appoint me.
I know.
And over time, as I developed as a lawyer, figured out what my strengths, what my skills and abilities, what my weaknesses were, it occurred to me that I might have something to contribute. you know, appellate courts, and particularly the state Supreme Courts, make decisions that affect us all. And those decisions are written in opinions. And as a lawyer, you read opinions to try to divine what the court intended the law to be. And my experience up to the time that I joined the court was that reading those opinions was a real challenge. They weren't always clear. They weren't always concise. And so it was, in my head, led me to thinking, you could do that.
Yeah.
And maybe you could do it in a clearer, more concise fashion so that those who used those opinions wouldn't have to work so hard to figure them out.
Yeah.
Whether I ultimately accomplish that or not, we'll leave to others to decide. But that's what sort of made me take the leap. I sought appointment, and I sought appointment to the trial court, thinking trial court, stepping stones, next step, appellate court. Those efforts went unfulfilled, and it finally dawned on me, well, if you really think your contribution is at the appellate level, be done with this notion of stepping stone. And so in Minnesota, we have this thing called mandatory retirement.
Yes.
In 1990, one of the justices of the Minnesota Supreme Court was, I think, 4.5, 5 months away from mandatory retirement. I thought I would, and he was up for re-election.
Yeah.
And I thought I would seek that seat and let the people of Minnesota decide. He resigned when I sought the seat, creating a vacancy. The governor filled the vacancy, seat no longer on the ballot. 2 years later, something similar, slightly different. We have this provision that allows justices who have not received full retirement benefits to extend their term. Again, justice this time had 18 months before mandatory retirement was up for re-election, before I could file papers to run against him. He had his term extended. And after a while, you sort of start taking it personally. I don't know why, but at any rate, decided to sue the governor. Because in my view, understanding the law, looking at the Constitution.
This is Carlson?
In this case, the term extension was unconstitutional.
Yes.
If you want to serve on the court, and most people get there by appointment, you probably shouldn't sue the governor.
Probably not.
Not the first thing you want to do.
Another little bumpy part of the story.
But given my, some would say, overdeveloped sense of fairness, and my understanding of the law, against the advice of others who said, you're wrong on the law and you're certainly wrong on the politics. Even in spite of that, I sued the governor, and long story short, I prevailed.
You became the first African-American Supreme Court justice.
I was given the opportunity to run for election on the court, to stand for election against two other people also ran.
And
the day that the court said we could file for election, and I did, the person who I originally, the sitting justice, did not seek re-election. The two people who sought election along with me started in on, he's just a football player.
God.
He's just a dumb football player. implicit and sometimes stated, he's just a dumb black football player. Fortunately for me, the people of Minnesota saw through that, didn't buy it, and with 63% of the vote, elected me, gave me the opportunity to serve on our court, and I will tell you, I am forever in their debt.
Well, fortunate for us as well, sir. Let's talk about your voice being lifted for justice, and let's discuss the Page Foundation. Throughout your career, you've been an advocate for educational equality, and your wife and you established the Page Education Foundation. Can you discuss or tell us what was the impetus, or how did you create this foundation together?
How did we create this foundation together? Well, for openers, Diane had, I don't know how to say this, she had a sense of justice and fairness that was as strong, if not stronger, than mine.
Yeah.
Whether it was gender justice, racial justice, economic justice, social justice. You know, I had been in schools and classrooms at that point on a regular basis. From the time I started playing football, you get put on this pedestal and people ask you to talk to young children.
Yeah.
So I'd spent some time in schools and classrooms. Also had that family experience of the value and importance of education.
Yeah.
Fast forward to 1988, we found out that I was going to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And the next day we sat down with some friends, and mind you, found that out. It was 5 years since my football playing days, or 6 years post football playing days. And being one who's never spent a lot of time looking in the rearview mirror, being honored for something that I'd done in the past. Great honor, don't get me wrong, but I got to be something more to this than that.
Yeah.
We sat down with some friends and talked about how we could make it more meaningful, both for me and benefit others. We came up with this idea of an education foundation. We could, another piece underlying that is what I had seen at that point in the law. I was an employment lawyer, and one of the things that you run into in discrimination cases is, the person of color isn't qualified, the woman wasn't qualified. Well, one way to take away that argument is to make sure that people are qualified.
Right.
So, education, qualifications, the two are linked.
How many scholars are there in the Page Foundation?
There have been over time about 9,000.
Wow.
There are, I think, 450 this year.
And they get educated and then they come back and mentor others.
In real time.
Wow.
While they're in school.
That's great.
50 hours per academic year. We developed this idea of having them serve young children. 50 hours per academic year serving young children, specifically in the area of education, kindergarten through 8th graders. So those young children could see somebody who looks like them, maybe somebody they know, somebody from their neighborhood, using education as a tool to achieve their hopes and dreams.
Wonderful.
We talk about heroes and role models. We talk about athletes and entertainers and politicians. We're influenced by those we can reach out and touch.
Right.
And so we've had close to 9,000 young men and women.
It's amazing.
Reaching out and touching, and having young children reach out and touch them. Sending the strong, clear message that education is a tool that you can use to reach whatever your hopes and dreams may be.
What a wonderful legacy for You and Diane, we know you lost her 2018, but just how important that is.
She's still touching
She is still developing.
all of those young people.
Wow. Thank you for that. That's amazing.
You know, let me just say one other thing.
Yeah.
Page Foundation, the work that it does, it is about our scholars. It's not about me, not about Diane, although I will say that I get all the credit. She's the one that was doing all the work. Okay, and particularly when I was on the court, when I couldn't do fundraising,
Yes.
she not only did the fundraising, she grew it into what it is today. And so, like I say, I get all the credit, but she is the heart and soul of everything that the Page Education Foundation ever did and continues to do.
What a wonderful legacy. Wow, there's so much that I want to ask you, and our time is running short. I'm going to combine a question. The book, All Rise, written by Bill McGrain,
Yes.
an authorized work of your life, your legacy, your family, the Page Foundation, has a chapter entitled All Rise. And it actually has the following words in it. What would happen if all of us would rise? What if all of us ignored the reasons why we shouldn't or couldn't and went out and made a difference in the lives of others and in our own lives, and the two actually work together? Now, you may also know that we have a speaker that is talking about bridge building here today on our stage. What can we be doing in terms of rising and making a difference in our world?
We have, each of us and every one of us has the ability to work with others, to help lift others, whether it's in any particular area, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's, any area. We all have the power. There is this sense that, well, Alan Page can do it because he's special, he's famous, he's whatever. We all have a contribution to make. Indeed, I think we all have an obligation to make that contribution. I have a friend, former COO of the Vikings, now the general manager of the Chicago Bears, Kevin Warren. Kevin spoke to every year the foundation has a recognition ceremony for new scholars. 5 years ago, Kevin spoke to our scholars, and one of the points he made was, we all want to ride the elevator to the top, to success. Well, when we're riding that elevator, when we get to the top, you can't just get off and go about your business.
Yeah.
You have to send the elevator back down. It's not enough to get off the elevator and wait for it or let it go back down on its own. You have to send the elevator back down. We have to be truthful. We cannot continue to live and go down this road where we're casually honest, where we're casually truthful, whether we're kind when it's convenient. The fact is that character matters, that truthfulness matters, that honesty matters, that the truth is linked to trust, and that without truth, we can't have trust. And if we don't have trust, we don't have anything.
Justice Ellen Page, we are incredibly grateful for your presence and the opportunity to hear from you today. Your accomplishments speak volumes, yet it is your earnest authenticity that is evident most. Thank you very much for being a voice in Minnesota, and thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.